afternoon. Now, as the UK prepares to enter the different stages of lockdown, the tourism hotspots across the country will be braced for a wave of visitors. So how are the UK's most popular regions preparing for the anticipated spike in visitor numbers? Well, with different rules in the home nations, we decided to focus this next session on England only. TTG News editor Jennifer Morris caught up with 3 of England's most popular visitor destinations to find out how they're preparing for a spike in domestic tourism.
Welcome everybody to the Tourism Hotspots panel discussion. My name's Jennifer Morris, I'm the news editor at TTG, and I'm joined today by 3 of the most popular locations and destinations from around the UK. We're going to be discussing the anticipated spike in tourism and also how this panel can kind of reassure tourism professionals that they can rest assured sending their customers to their locations is going to be safe and what they can kind of expect from that going forward. And we should clarify, we're talking about travel when it's kind of permitted to do so as opposed to right now, because I know that a few of you have had some problems with that. So first of all, we have Malcolm Bell, who's Chief Executive of Visit Cornwall.
Hello.
Down there at the seaside. We have Jim Walker, who's Chair of Cumbria Tourism.
Hello.
And we have Will Miles, Managing Director of Visit Isle of Wight.
Hello there.
So I thought I'd kick off, all, if you don't mind, by me asking you to tell the audience a little bit about your destination. I'm sure a lot of them will be familiar with where you represent, but it'd be good to just give a bit of an overview, as well as some of the most kind of popular areas to visit. I don't know if you want to kick off, Jim?
Yeah, certainly, thanks. So Cumbria Tourism is a destination management organisation for the whole county of Cumbria. So it includes the Lake District National Park, which is one of our high spots, but also includes areas like part of the Yorkshire Dales National Park since the boundaries changed. So the Sebra and the Howgill Fells, Kirby Stephen area is all close to or part of the Yorkshire Dales. But Cumbria is actually a lot more than that too. It's got the amazing border city of Carlisle in the north. It's got the Cumbrian coastline going right down north to south, and it's got the Morecambe Bay area as well. So it's more than just the Lake District, it's a wide, expansive area. We operate what we call an attract and disperse policy, because many people have heard of the Lake District and come here first, but often then people go on to discover lesser known areas, including those areas I've mentioned, but also the Eden Valley too, which is a beautiful green pasture land. Lots of places to go and discover, and lots of really nice things to do to visit.
Brilliant. And Malcolm?
Hi, well, Cornwall's wonderful, of course. I would say that's what they pay me for. We get about 5 million staying visitors, 25 million bed nights, and obviously an awful lot of day visitors. 400 miles of coast and 400 beaches and coves, which is our biggest asset. We have obviously the Eden project, lots of gardens, very tropical gardens, subtropical gardens, and lots of heritage. And I suppose, like many places, it's a bedrock of the local economy. 1 in 3 households depends partly or fully on tourism down here, and obviously so does the food and drink sector. So it's an integral part of the offer is some Cornish beer, some Cornish seafood, as well as a Cornish view.
Excellent. Over to you, Will.
Okay, so Isle of Wight, we welcome in normal times, we welcome about 2.5 million visitors each year, and about 300,000 coming to us by yacht. About £300 million spent each year in the tourism economy, and it's worth about £500 million across the island. We 23 miles wide by 13 miles deep, and over half of the Isle of Wight is designated area of outstanding natural beauty, and we're one of only 7 UNESCO biosphere reserves in the UK. Now, what have we got? Beaches, countryside, walking, anything you want to do. Isle of Wight Festival, Cows Week, round the island race, Osborne House, all these different things which makes the island really, really special. And also, that's why it has been voted by Countryfile magazine as the UK holiday destination of the year.
There you go. Thank you very much. So I suppose it'd be good to start off with, if you don't mind, just give me a bit of an overview as to how your tourism industry has been faring during the crisis. Obviously, it's been a couple of months now of a lot of uncertainty, and whilst it's looking like the lockdown might be kind of gradually relaxed going forward, would you be able to just fill me in on how things have gone so far? Malcolm, I know that you've been quite vocal on already in the media about the kind of, you've had a bit of an influx in tourists, which we can come on to, but yeah, how's things been down in Cornwall?
Well, I think we were noticing it in the build up to March. So actually, in fact, we put the notice to ask people not to come on the 20th of March ahead of the Prime Minister's, because you were getting a lot of nervousness from, well, first of all, from businesses of should they or shouldn't they operate, but equally the local population. And since then, obviously, it's been a very roller coaster ride. First period was a lot of businesses worried about should they shut, what do they do, business insurance, how would they cope? Then you had lots of good announcements around furloughing money, the grants, the rate rebates, clear of business rates and delays. Increasingly, though, I think recently, in the recent week, like lots of places, a bit of a worry about the extension of day visitors could come from anywhere. Because at the end of the day, the toilets were shut, the bars are shut, the hotels are shut, the cafes are shut. So you come a long way and there's nothing really other than a view, which is a beautiful view. And now we've got the businesses very, very concerned about what is actually going to happen now. The government's recovery plan is very clear on page 31. I've read it so many times. And the one thing it's clear on is there is no clarity. There's a lot of ifs and buts about the 4th of July. If you read it, obviously it's subject to slippage. And obviously we've also got a major job, like many other destinations, about opening up responsibly and taking the public health and the local authority, and more importantly, the local community with us. So it's actually a very strange time at the moment, time of uncertainty and a time of worry for the businesses, as there's pressure for refunds. Nobody wants to take on any more debt, C-bills or bounce back loans. And we're all waiting to wonder if summer will happen or not.
And I think quite a lot of the economy, a lot of people's jobs are dependent on tourism in Cornwall. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, 53,000 jobs, over 23% of the workforce, but it's also that fact that it's 1 in 3 households. So at the moment, I think people are starting to get worried on furlough. I think a lot were worried about the announcement that if they carry on furloughing, that businesses will have to make a contribution, because unless the businesses are actually operating in August, they won't be making a contribution. So we are, lots of people who are furloughed who maybe were quite happy for the first few weeks, and now getting more and more worried about, are they on the short list to be made redundant?
Yeah, I think we've experienced similar kind of concerns in the outbound industry as well. How about you, Will? Is it a sort of similar experience?
Yeah, the experience is very similar. The island is quite a seasonal, for tourism, quite a seasonal business, and this couldn't have happened at a worse time. Businesses just coming out of the winter period, cash flow was tight and just getting ready to rock and roll for the season, and it couldn't have happened at a worse time. But, businesses are being creative. Businesses are looking as to how they can come out of it at the far end of it, at the end of it all. And as Malcolm quite rightly says, the 4th of July is quite everybody wants the 4th of July to happen, but that could move backwards quite easily depending on what happens with the virus. So people are working and they're asking lots of questions, and the monies and the furlough scheme and the grants are all assisting keeping the tourism industry here ready for when it's time for people to come back to the island.
And Jim, any particular different experience in Cumbria, or very much the same?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there, really. Tourism in Cumbria is worth £3 billion. It employs like nearly 70,000 people, so it's a big issue for us. I think the lack of clarity was one of the biggest challenges, and we appreciate it's a very difficult and complex subject for the government to deal with, and there's some really good announcements in there, but also there's been a lot of announcements that have been rather misty and foggy, and that's made it very difficult for the industry. Our industry in Cumbria obviously is medium and some large operators, but a lot of small operators too, and they've been desperate for advice and guidance from the destination management organisation to help them through this and trying to find out what happens next. So this 4th of July date we keep talking about, it's really, really important to all of us. We're all heading for that. But really, I think if we can't see any light at the end of the tunnel as we approach that date, a lot of businesses are really going to struggle because they will not be able to earn the income they need to survive through the winter. But we're very lucky because we have a long season here and we have a lot of winter trade, but not enough just to see businesses through the winter. So if things don't improve quite soon, I think it's going to be a very difficult time with redundancies and unemployment, and that'll have a massive impact on this county, which depends on this industry.
Absolutely. And obviously you don't want to dwell on it, but very quickly to touch upon, I know it has been in the national press about tourists, even during the lockdown, flocking to pretty destinations, going to stay in second homes, despite the advice against that. Has that been a particular problem for any of you?
Well, I think we have perceived it might have been a problem, but by dealing with it proactively, I think certainly the Lake District, from what I understand in Cornwall too, from what I've heard, it's had a really big impact. And we've had a very quiet last week when Wednesday came. We've had a very quiet weekend too. So that's really been fantastic in terms of having the right sort of impact. However, I mean, I think it's not just about the medical side, it's also about reassuring local residents that things are under control. Because there's three communities in here to look after. I think there's our businesses, there's our visitors, and there's local residents. We've got to look after all three equally. We've got to have clear communication strategies with every single one if we're going to move out of this. If we don't do it properly, and if one doesn't do it right, then there's going to be problems going forward. So we've got to work so hard with our local communities. And what we're trying to do here in Cumbria is try and make sure we work with parish councils and local representatives so they understand the complexity of what our operators are already doing to prepare for opening up, so they can see it is comprehensive and it will work. Only then, if we take people together, will we come out of this happily.
From an Isle of Wight perspective, we've not had such an influx of these visitors coming to the hotspots, because you've got to take a ferry to come here. And so there's our ferry operators who have seen massive downfall in their numbers. That is almost assisting that sort of side of it all. But the flip side of that is seeing quite a lot of second homeowners coming to the island, and I'll take Jim's point, absolutely. Keeping the locals on side and communicating with local people is key and paramount to this, because they're here 24/7, 365, and not just when the second homeowners or visitors are here. So we've got to take them forward with us and make sure they know that we're doing everything to protect them, as well as the visitors, as well as the staff that are going to be working in hotels and all these different places.
I think it's actually interesting, because we had the same thing. Good communication meant last weekend went well. It's just given us another challenge now that lots of local people have realised how wonderful it is on a sunny weekend not to have visitors around and have the beaches to yourself. So there's a bit of a growing thing that actually a summer without visitors might be quite attractive to many residents.
Isn't really aligned with your kind of your job description, I suppose, of inviting people.
I think there's a real opportunity there too, because for the first time, local residents can actually see what a massive impact tourism has on the economy, and not just the primary impacts, but the secondary and tertiary impacts feeding through the economy. And we've talked about this quite a lot before as DMOs, and some people listen and some don't. But this is a really good opportunity when people see how tough it is, how tourism really sinks into every part of the local economy.
Yeah.
Just from a perspective where we are, we're actually. Our job is to promote people to come into the island, to come onto the island, whereas we're actually putting together a Rediscover Your Island, where we're actually going out to the local population about them discovering what's on the island, as they may not have done that for many years. So that's going to be quite a positive part to what we do as well.
Yeah, interesting. I suppose a good question to ask is, from an outside perspective, kind of expecting that there will be a big jump in visitors, and people holidaying in the UK towards the end of the year once the lockdown is lifted. Is that something that you 100% expect, or do you think there'll be a nuanced approach? Do you think it will take a little while for things to actually start picking up, because there might be a bit of a lack of confidence from tourists?
I think from a Cornwall perspective, we know we've got a lot of bookings in the bag already for July and August. Air challenge is probably, will we be allowed to open? And the other aspect is, how do you cope with social distancing in the Cornish fishing villages in August if we are at full capacity? Because normally our population will grow by around 180 to 200,000 people a day. And if you've ever been to St Ives or Mevagissey or Looe in August, that's going to be a real challenge. So one of the challenges we face is not only getting the businesses open, but how we work with the local government about how the public realm and towns and villages can cope, particularly although it very rarely happens in Cornwall, occasionally we get this strange thing called rain that does put people off the beach. And on those days, they tend to flock to about 8 towns. That causes big issues in a normal summer. but actually would actually be very difficult to keep any distancing, let alone social distancing. So that's one of the dilemmas we've got about how much can we open up in July and August.
Yeah. I mean, to the others, are you expecting a big spike sort of straight away, or do you think it will be a gradual kind of increase? Obviously, like you say, Malcolm, it does depend slightly on the weather, and in the UK we do have a bit of a limit on when people can take their summer holidays.
I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the industry to grasp in terms of domestic tourism growth. But one of the challenges, and Malcolm's alluded a bit to this, is about capacity. Because actually, if we have to reduce capacity in the accommodation, the attractions that are operating, can they still remain profitable as they come out of this crisis? And that's going to be really difficult. One of my main jobs is working for a steamer company and a steam railway. Those are quite difficult attractions to manage in that sense. So they need a critical mass of visitors to make them work financially. So that's quite a worry. In terms of managing capacity elsewhere, we're already looking at ways of doing that. The national parks now come up with a way of indicating which car parks are busy and which are not, so people can check online. And by the messaging we're putting out saying, you know, take care when you come, be sensible, plan ahead, make sure you book things as much as possible, and try and manage that capacity as best we can. But it's an opportunity, this fantastic growth in domestic tourism, but also it's a massive challenge to carry it off successfully. And again, as we said earlier, not to cause an issue with local residents and local communities who are still concerned about the future.
Yeah,
I do think that you know, I completely agree with Malcolm and Jim on that one. You know, domestic tourism will see a boost this year and potentially going into next year as well, which is something that we've all been looking for many years. But looking after them, and the capacity at attractions, the capacity at hotels, the social distancing being implemented from locally. Our local bus company is telling us, you know, a bus to be socially distanced would take a double decker down from 80 capacity down to 15. Now, the viability of running that is a different approach, and so that fits in with all of it. It fits in with attractions, it fits in with hotels, it fits in with cafes. The whole scenario will have to be looked at. But confidence and giving the actual visitor the confidence to say, yeah, we're here, we've done all of these things, we've taken all of these things into consideration, so come back, enjoy yourselves, because we are here and we're taking all that into consideration.
Absolutely, and we'll come on to kind of going forward what plans you guys might have in place. But I suppose just to come back, Jim, quickly to something you mentioned about the national parks, car parks being able to kind of reallocate people. I mean, are there any other ways in which you can kind of manage overcrowding in a particularly busy year in other destinations like the Isle of Wight?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, you know, if you think about the busiest area in the Lake District, you might think about Bowness Promenade, and a lot of that's got to do with messaging. A lot of that's got to do with advisory, not heavy policing, but management of visitors. And there's all sorts of talk at the moment about employing volunteers or accessing volunteers to do that sort of work too. Already you've got, you know, Blue Badge guides in that information role in some different ways, but there are lots of national park volunteers. And if anything, this crisis has made us work even more closely together. There's always been a good relationship between the DMO and the National Park, but what's come out of this, I think, has been a close relationship with the police too. And some of the issues that we had to deal with a week last Sunday were linked to listening very carefully to what the police and what the health authorities' messages were, and trying to chime with that rather than go against it. So we are all working together. There's lots to achieve here. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging, I think. However, the goal is to keep these businesses running, and that's what we're aimed at, and that's what we need to do.
A very careful balance, I'm sure. Will or Malcolm, do you have any other? You know, is there anything else you've been working on in terms of looking at dispersing tourists at all when they do inevitably come?
I think part of it is about information and how social media. We've got tools now that we can use. I think the other one is also, like, totally agree with Jim, it's working with partners. So we're already starting discussions on things like increased traffic restrictions to ease, you know, open up the streets to walk in, even in some of the small towns like Lou, even a sort of advisory one-way system for pedestrians, because you can start thinking quite creatively around this. So I think the other one we're looking at is actually, again, in trying to help the businesses cope, is think about this winter, think about what we can do. there's a lot of people who can holiday, the baby boomers who won't be flying abroad. What can we do about maybe even running an open studios week in November and some other things where we can disperse and get extra business in November? Because it will be limited what we can do in the summer. So what else can we actually do? How can you create, in a way, festivals designed around social distancing, which is lots of different things all over the place. So I think it's a time for innovation, not only in the summer, but what do we do? And going forward, I think, particularly for our 3 destinations, as somebody who's slightly over 40, the one thing I think a lot of people would have realised, particularly I'm over 60, is, my God, I've got to keep my lungs healthy and I've got to stay fit if I want to live beyond 75 or 80, because this might come back. That's a massive opportunity in leisure walking and general fitness for the baby boomer market, the richest generation we've ever had. So I think there'll be new products that innovate out of this, and maybe some fun and some other things. So it's a matter of coping this year, doing the best we can in the winter, and then really seeing where the new opportunities will be going forward. And our destinations are well shaped for that.
And I'm sure it's always been a sort of ambition of you guys to try and bring tourists to the destination year round. As you say, I suppose, do you think there's a likelihood that even if Brits can't get their summer holiday, they might be interested in a more wintry holiday in the UK, or do you think it's very much one or the other?
Well, from an Isle of Wight perspective, in the winter time, it's when you come out with the produce and the restaurants and the pubs and all of the different elements that are around that their ability to go out, to go walking, to get dirty, to sit in front of a roaring fire and enjoy some really good food and drink in that winter period. I mean, picking up on something Malcolm said about looking to do something differently in the autumn, it actually, right now, it should be the Isle of Wight Walking Festival, which I've had to postpone, which is 2 weeks of over 100 different walks with like 20 people going on different walks across the island. I'm looking at bringing that in sort of late October time, so that we can actually attract more people at a later period of time to extend that season out a little bit more. But it's about bringing in the amazing produce, the amazing foodstuffs that we have here, and linking that in with product. And people will come as a result of that. But it's that socially distancing element that will, it'll be families that come, it'll be the intergenerational families that will come around that period of time.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, and I think we need to work on that. I think the only thing to mention is we need to think differently. We need to be creative. We need to be proactive. But this all does take quite a lot of effort and quite a lot of resource. And one of our concerns, I think, as DMOs, is the current destination management organisation structure in England is pretty, how should we put it, changeable, shall we say? And as a result, Cumbria Tourism is 97% funded by private sector members' fees. So the public sector income coming into us is very, very little indeed. And if we're going to do all this work, which is great, and we're really up for it, we're really excited to look at things new and work hard to protect our businesses, but we're going to need some help to do that. And there's not a lot of help out there at the moment. The recent Tourism Society paper about DMOs and about their future and about resources is a really appropriate one at this juncture. And we really hope government listen to that, because we can do all these things. We can really make it work with some funding, but it's going to need that input to pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't agree more, Jim. I think now's the time for almost a new 2020 Tourism Development Act from the 1968 one. And what is the new role? How can it deliver on the low carbon agenda? There's lots of things that could be done, but it almost takes that same sort of vision that was all those years ago in setting up the structure and to deliver a new style of tourism that delivers so much more with a lower impact. But that will take a lot of intervention and support from the government and not ignoring the sector.
And do you feel like there is enough interest from MPs in that kind of cause?
Yeah, we're certainly lobbying really hard.
Yeah, if I was to say our MP prior to all of this was supportive, he's suddenly become exceptionally supportive, because he understands the reason. I'm lucky. I'm not like Malcolm or Jim. I've got one MP to look after and deal with. Quite nice. He's completely with it. He's bought into this whole element of what Visit Isle of Wight do. He's bought into what tourism brings to this island, and he completely gets it. We're funded. 50% of our funds are from are from private sector, but we also have we're funded 50% by a DBID, so Business Improvement District. So we're having to look at how we deal with that going forward, because we're coming to the end of that period of time. So how is that funded going forward? And I've challenged DCMS to actually look at that in a different way.
Okay, interesting. I suppose moving along slightly, you'll all be aware of Visit Britain's proposed quality mark that they're looking to introduce. Is that something that you have enough information on yet? Are you already kind of working with your tourism industries at how that might kind of be implemented? Do you think it's going to happen in time for the proposed spike in tourists?
I mean, I think this is linked to something else around registration, to be honest. I think we've had challenges for quite a while on the new economy, there's nothing wrong with it, but also on compliance to the rules that do exist. So we were working along the same lines to nominate up. I mean, we thought more of a kite park. We even came up with a logo which included saying taking care, because I think saying legal and safe is a bit clinical. But I think something where a business has to, what we're saying, a business has to mitigate the risks. They always have had to. A big holiday park or a hotel has dealt with Legionella, botulism, Norwalk, PAT testing, all sorts of things. But what you should do is be able to demonstrate you've mitigated those risks. You've got good operating procedures, excellent training and supervision, and good communication, coming back to Jim's point, to your local community, your guests and your staff. And that should wrap up around whatever this kite mark is. I worry it might be a bit too light touch, so people just tick a box, and that could discredit it. Equally, I wouldn't want to have a very heavy hand on it, but I think businesses should have to demonstrate clearly that they have undertaken risk management, risk minimization, mitigation, and then have the documentation to prove it, to give the visitors. And that should apply whether you're Airbnb or anybody else. And if Airbnb hosts can come up to meet that standard, then great, no problem whatsoever. But we do need to have everybody registered and everybody working to that standard of risk management.
Because again, it can take quite a lot of resource.
Yeah, sorry. I'm completely behind what Visit England are doing in relation to the actual work itself, and it comes as a result of stuff that Malcolm and I have discussed previously, and what we've been doing in the past as well. Like Malcolm, our tourism industry is good to go. As in, I'm having to hold them back for these national standards to come out, so that we actually have that national standard that is understood by someone who visits Cornwall, who visits the Lake District, who visits the Isle of Wight or Hull or wherever it may be. You can't confuse the customer. They have to understand what's going on and what's there, because we could all come up with different schemes, and that's not going to be, it's not going to be amazing, but I think there needs to be that national perspective on there. And, we've created a logo, we've got a good to go logo on there, which is ready to actually link into what Visit Britain and Visit England are actually going to provide. So I'm looking forward to it. Again, it doesn't need to be heavy-handed. If you begin to be heavy-handed, it won't come into place until October, November time. It needs to be now, so that we can give that confidence back to the public, confidence to the industry, and again, back to what Jim said earlier, back to the local people that are understanding what's happening.
Will, what's kind of required of this good to go mark then? Is the onus on the tourism providers themselves to fill out a questionnaire and check, follow a checklist, or will there be any kind of external help available?
Yeah, we'll work with the businesses. We're talking to the businesses now about these sort of things, and it's going to be based on the Visit England national standards, because as I said previously, I think it should be, but ultimately, we're going to be giving people it's that confidence factor. So have you filled out your risk assessments? Have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done the next thing? So that to enable them to tick all of the boxes, to enable them to go out with this, come to that. I completely agree with Malcolm. Safe and legal are words that should be put in a little box and hidden away at the back of a cupboard. Some about confidence and giving the people the confidence to actually come back. So I'm giving the businesses the confidence to go out and shout about what they can do.
Yeah, sort of taking the edge off, if you like, a little bit, just to tip people over into feeling confident, like you say.
Oh yeah, it's that value of external. So it's a value of external accreditation, isn't it? Really, it's having somebody look at it, but as long as it's meaningful, it can inspire confidence. That's fine, but it can't just be in itself the end of it. It's got to be promoted properly and developed properly. Got to be communicated properly, so it really does get the value out of it, and then it can have a role to play. I don't think many of our visitors understand, as Malcolm said, what our general businesses go through in terms of all the different legislation they've got to comply with. So this is an opportunity to bring it all up together and make sure people understand how professionally our industry operates and the hurdles it's got to jump over to make sure it goes successfully.
Yeah.
I mean, there's interesting anomalies at the moment when you think of safety, is that a garden centre can open, but a private garden can't, one of our like Moss Gardens of Heligan. And if you walk around Heligan, you wouldn't be picking things up and down. In a garden centre, you are picking things up and down. So the irony at the moment is that I would argue that going around a garden that's a visitor attraction is a lot safer than walking around a garden centre. But that's just the irony of where we are on this unlocking.
and at the moment, we I'm being challenged by our industry for people who are saying we are self-contained, self-catering properties. Why can't we open? If we're here and we can prove, and we're doing all of our cleaning, we can be here for people, but it's about challenging them, challenging us, and us challenging the government and the local authority to actually get the right things in place.
So I suppose just to revert to what we were saying earlier, you're all working towards the kind of July the 4th date, because I suppose what else can you do? Is that the kind of mentality at the moment?
We've got to do that, and we've got to prepare our businesses to be ready to jump off the mark, really, because we very much hope that will happen. And as we said, that's really important for the season's income. But it could slip, and it depends, doesn't it, on the medical situation and how things develop there. I sincerely hope we can move on the 4th of July, but also we need to be clear about what will move first. And I think there's a general understanding in the industry that self-catering, second homes, owned holiday homes on holiday parks could be quite quickly out there in terms of moving forward. And that in itself will start to power up the local economy, which will help so much for a lot of small retailers. And then if we can move towards more takeaways and more food outlets, I think things will start to get back. And whatever we thought about the decision of Wight last Sunday, and we were in Cumbria very surprised, it has started to move things forward and for people to be more optimistic about the future. And that in itself has been really interesting and really positive. But we're all just waiting for the next step, really.
Yeah. I suppose I know what the answer will probably be, but it's worth asking. Obviously, we might be anticipating a bit of a spike in visitors in the next few months and towards the end of this year. Do you all feel that there'll be an enduring kind of demand for staycations into next year and beyond, really? I think, like somebody said earlier, it's always been the ambition to kind of re-inspire the UK public to holiday at home. Do you feel like the moment is now, and that it could genuinely be a sort of fundamental shift in holidays?
I think sorry, I was repeating. I think people are looking at difference. You look at Spring Watch, Winter Watch. There are things now, and there will be a generation that maybe decides that they want to travel less. Not that they don't want to travel, but maybe it's just short hops to go to the continent and do things when you can travel your own country. We've all I think probably all around here, we've all discovered things right on their doorstep, a lot more interest. So I think if we get the marketing right, which goes back to budgets, about what's important in life, about spending time with your friends, discovering your own area, certain markets, can really pay on this. Hotels, we've got, amazing hotels that are such good value in November, early December, February and March that can, with beautiful facilities that I think we can actually market to a market that will respond. But that's what we've got to see. And we've got to see if people do go back to the rabid travel habits we've got into rather than the valuing time.
I think you're right. And I think there's a big issue there in terms of what people have seen on the TV. They're seeing the issues to do with cruise ships. They're seeing the issues to do with plane travel. and what is going to happen to the airline industry, and what's going to happen to airline pricing. Will it ever be like it was before? So this is a fantastic opportunity for us to really push domestic tourism, but there's a lot of work to do that, and that's what we're up for.
I do think there's a part in this. I mean, I certainly see a spike coming over the remainder of this year, because if prior to doing this, I watched the news and they're talking about a 14-day quarantine when you come back from any foreign holiday or foreign break. Who can actually take a month's holiday these days? So people will look and think, I'm going to do my 2 weeks, or I'm going to do my week in the UK. But I also go back to the fact of rediscovering what the island has for local people, but rediscovering what the UK has for its own population, I think will be an amazing opportunity, and I think will take us forward.
Brilliant. Our time's nearly up. Thank you so much, guys, for such an interesting discussion. I just wanted to ask you a little bit. Obviously, a lot of TTG's readers are typically outbound travel agents. However, there are travel agents who do book domestic holidays. I was wondering whether, as DMOs, you work much with travel agents in the UK, and whether that's something you expect to grow going forward if there is this kind of reignited demand for domestic holidays. Don't know who wants to take that one. Jim, you're nodding.
I think yeah, we don't do enough with that sector. But I think, again, we've got to be creative about the packages and the opportunities on offer, and we've got to make it more relevant. I think perhaps more bespoke packages might be the way forward. We've got to think about good value packages too, because actually, if a lot of people are being made redundant and their disposable income's limited, they're going to not have as much money to spend. So yeah, we've got some interesting small coach mini tour operations which could use social distancing to work there too. So yeah, it's up to us to be creative, I think, and try and generate that work. One of our worries though is about the rail industry and seeing how that's going to work with capacity down to 1/10 of what it was previously. We've been working really hard in the Lake District to encourage people to come by public transport, which has been pretty successful, and especially using electric vehicles and using walking or cycling. And it's how to make that work in packages which will work as perhaps in nuclear family groups. That'll work really well together, that's not a problem, but with slightly larger groups could be tricky. So work to do that. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops and how we can set up a successful partnership with travel agents.
I think the other one is the jargon word these days, and it is repivot your business during the crisis and afterwards. So probably a call for the industry that's predominantly tried to take people out is they've got big databases of customers who probably don't want to go out at the moment out of the country, might not want to go out some more to engage with the industry and the DMOs in the country, because there might be a whole new market that didn't exist, until this crisis, and might well exist for not only this year, but also the next 2 or 3 years. And with some people, if you look at travel insurance worries and stuff like that for the over 70s and underlying health issues, there could be a market that is very valuable that we want to give good holidays to, that will actually be turning their back on, if not all, certainly a high proportion of overseas trips.
And do you think that oh, sorry, go ahead, Will.
Sorry, I mean, our transport operators, so our ferry operators, they work with the trade quite a lot. So working with some of the big holiday park companies to actually package up to come onto the island. So we're working quite closely with them. As Jim says, we could do more. And maybe we should be doing more, but it's coach operators and travel agents are they're key to the part of unlocking this whole thing. Malcolm's quite right again. He's saying that they've got huge databases, and it's about them unlocking the UK domestic product.
Do you think there'll be any more you'll be able to do in terms of showcasing your product, for want of a better word? I'm so used to saying product, or your destination to the travel agents, perhaps through roadshows, or would you invite travel agencies and tour operators to get in touch directly for information?
Well, for us, get in touch with us. We have a trade guy who looks after all of that. My background is in travel trade for many years ago, but it's about getting in touch. Roadshows are absolutely amazing. That we can out and telling people what's there, but you have that specific product, and as DMOs, having that packaged product is in our hands is quite difficult. but I think it's working in partnership. So for us, working in partnership with our ferry operators to actually get them here is actually quite positive. So I think we should be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, we've been working with air trade over the last year or two on the overseas travel trade, saying that don't always imagine it's a 50-seater coaches. You know, these are small groups, higher value small groups.
Yeah.
And that also applies in our own market. So it's just a matter of us pivoting our travel trade work to work with those, of staying in special places, indulging yourself, you know, premium price, but an amazing experience. And we can deliver that as much as the international competition. We've always been chasing international to come here. Now let's chase our own market.
Yeah, brilliant. And do you think that there's enough capacity in terms of hotel rooms and other accommodation in all of your locations, or is that something as well that you think might have to increase over the next couple of years?
That's a good question.
I
think the challenge I would say to a lot of this group is it is the baby boomer generation, the plus empty nester. And when I look at the amount of investment in the spas, I mean, we share an owner in Watergate Bay, and the owners of the Hotel in the Lakes, which I've forgotten about what it's called now. Judy will shoot me.
Yeah, the lake, yeah. Another place, the lake, yeah.
Yeah. You know, those are brilliant any time of the year. You know, the spa facilities, the swimming facilities, the sheer quality. Lots of our hotels will operate at 75% during the winter anyway. If there's a market, a lot more will invest to meet that market, because obviously that's the golden goose, is to have decent yields at the slowest and the lowest time of the year. You know, it's not difficult to sell a hotel room in July and August in Cornwall. It's the other 10 months we have to work at.
And if our overseas markets are going to be slow to recover, there'll be capacity there for a considerable amount of time. So that's a real opportunity as well. On investment, it'd be interesting to see what happens next. We're aware that quite a lot of investment decisions have been delayed because of what's been going on. So we need to watch out carefully and see where that'll happen. But the brilliant thing about Cumbria is because there's the national park in the middle, the Lake National Park, and there's hotels in lots of different areas of the county, there's capacity there too, isn't there? So we've got that opportunity to work with them too and make sure they can accommodate.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much to my panel. It's been a really interesting discussion. Thanks to Malcolm, Jim and Will. And we are now going to go into a live Q&A. Thank you very much.
To join us, just to kick off the conversation, Jen touched on about capacity and the fact that later on in the year, you know, it could be great opportunities to kind of capitalise on using on winter and autumn. But just looking ahead straight at the summer, is there still capacity available? You know, are travel agents going to be able to book holidays for their customers this summer, or is it much more realistic to think ahead to winter into 2021?
From a Cornwall perspective, it looks as though July and August, which is already pretty pre-booked, is going very, very strong at the moment.
Right.
Worryingly so in July, because we're not sure we'll be able to open. But that does leave September and into October, which can also be wonderful times. And I'll also say it's probably a good time to talk to hotels about next year, because I think people would quite like to have that confidence of forward booking and forward commitments, really. And I think the travel trade working with hotels, you probably get a different response than you would have done in previous years, particularly at that medium and a higher price point.
I mean, that point about the travel agent partnerships we'll come on to, because I think that's a really pertinent one right now, and one our audience certainly is interested in. Will, in terms of the Isle of Wight, what are the capacity issues that we're looking at for this summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's still there will still be, as Malcolm says, there'll be some issues in and around July and August, but I still think there's capacity there to be had. Certainly from some of the larger holiday home parks, and certainly from the smaller and more bespoke and boutique B&Bs and guest houses. There's plenty there to be done, but and from a travel agent perspective, you know, it's about getting in touch to get access to that.
Fantastic. And Jim, I can see you've just joined us as well. And we'll come back to that travel agent point. But Jim, we were just talking about capacity issues. Is there any space available still for summer, or should agents be looking ahead to autumn and 2021 instead?
Yeah, I think the challenge is waiting to see. but there will be capacity, and that's where DMOs, destination management organisations, can help really. So please do contact us, and let's see how we can make this work to the best of our ability. I think we can offer you as agents and operators putting things together, the product knowledge that we have every day of our working life sort of thing, so we can help signpost. We haven't got the resources to do detailed itineraries all the time, but we can signpost and put you in touch with people in accommodation attractions that can help. So yeah, I think there's real opportunities there to work together to make this the best we can.
Fantastic. And this partnership with the trade that you mentioned, you know, it's fantastic that we're able to kind of talk about this now. I know there've been frustrations before from agents that perhaps they felt they haven't been able to work with some domestic market providers, just with issues with regards to commission. But the fact that all three of you are very receptive to working with travel agents, and your message is just to get in touch, is that fair to say?
Yes, certainly it is.
Yeah, from my perspective, certainly, yeah, get in touch with us. You know, there's product there, and there's product to be developed. And as Jim quite rightly says, you know, we may not be able to give you itineraries all of the time, but you know, there's lots of information there we can signpost you to, and we can assist. And there will be commissionable product there. It's putting you in the right direction for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think by working with you too, we can match very carefully to get the best possible match to give you the edge in terms of what you're offering too. So the signposting scheme should work well. So yeah, talk to us, please.
Fab. And we've got a question here from Jo Kessel. She says a lot of island communities who've contained COVID-19 aren't keen on visitors. I think that would probably go to the same extent to Cumbria and tourism and Cornwall as well. She says, is the Isle of Wight and these two destinations keen to welcome visitors back in July? I think that point is really pertinent, and somebody else has flagged about this image that certain destinations have said, because we've said no visitors, don't come. Have you put visitors off? And are you concerned that actually the locals don't want visitors?
Well, I'll take that as being the island amongst us all here. The part of that is that, you know, we're saying the time is not right now. We're not saying don't come. The time is not right just at this particular time. You know, we'll look to change our messaging very, very soon about bringing people back. Yeah, and we need to take the local people with us so that they can understand that, you know, tourism on the Isle of Wight is worth nearly £500 million worth of economic impact onto the island. That's huge. That's people's jobs. That's people's livelihood. That's all these different things. Yes, there is a health element to deal with that, but yeah, I don't think we will have shut off visitors completely. But they're certainly, yeah, come back. You know, but we need to take everyone with us.
Sure, Malcolm, do you want to?
I think there's been a bit of stuff on social media, and there have been some nervousness. I mean, we were one of the first ones to say just before the lockdown, you know, please don't come. And actually all we've been doing is reinforcing government messaging. So it's not been something we've been purposefully doing outside the messaging. What we will obviously do is to make it clear that people will be welcome. And although there's a bit of nervousness and understandable nervousness, I think as time goes on and people start seeing the economic consequences, attitudes will change. And we had a jump of 7,500 more unemployed in Cornwall yesterday. Yeah. So people are starting to noticing, farmers, fishermen can't sell their fish. So I think there's a realisation, and although there's a bit of a negativity that's always there, it's actually only about less than 10%, if that, of the population. Right. Everybody else will be more than comfortable, providing we get the safeguards right of distancing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Exactly that. Jim?
Yeah, we live in strange times, don't we? And it was a very peculiar thing for a destination management organisation to say, don't come. Which of us ever dreamed would be doing that? It was very peculiar, but it was the right thing to do. And there's that expression, isn't there? You know, we close down quickly to save lives. We'll open up slowly to save livelihoods. And that's really important going forward. We need people's confidence. You know, we have, for example, the Lake District 2 national parks. They are national treasures, and people will want to visit them. So as long as we do it carefully and wisely, and we get it right, it will work fine. But we do need to take local residents with us, and that's a key part of our work going forward for all three of us, I think.
I mean, you mentioned this point, Jim, about confidence, and I think the quality standard mark, which was discussed during the panel discussion, and indeed earlier today by Visit Britain, there is a consensus that there is this mark that's needed. I think it was interesting, I think, Malcolm, it was you that said about this needs to apply to every accommodation. So Airbnb, for example, needs to also have this mark? Do you think this should become an industry-wide mark that every single property has? Because earlier we were having discussions with some accommodation providers who said, actually, you know, it wouldn't really work in the same way because we sell properties in Portugal and elsewhere, and we can't have this uniform mark. But perhaps you think this might be the way going forward, that UK properties almost adhere to this safety standard mark?
I think we've got to give people reassurance. You know, the old hotel scheme brought in the 60s was to give people reassurance and quality assurance. I think people want safety assurance now. So I think actually what we do need is compulsory registration, free hopefully. So every accommodation provider is actually registered. And then I think you've got to look at which ones are most appropriate for the quality mark. I mean, now we were talking lunchtime with a group, and if you're a touring park dealing mainly with motorhomes and caravans with all their own facilities and very little shared space, you could argue that a good risk assessment and a statement on the website is enough. If you're a quirky hotel with lots of areas where you might bump into people or touch points, then you probably do want an assurance that's a bit more around a kite mark. But I think what we do need is to everybody to be on the same level in terms of being registered and actually being checked to make sure that they do understand the level of compliance we're going to have to be working towards.
And how do you loop Airbnb then into that?
I would say that all Airbnb hosts should be made to be registered as well. And if they can meet the standards, welcome on board. But they need to reach the standards that others will reach. And that is as much to not only protect the public, it's protect the host, but also the local community. You've got to have a short, you know, quality. People got to be confident, not only as guests, but also in the local community and people who are working in establishments. So if you wrap that up, and the kite mark fits into part of that system, but so does being very transparent about how you've mitigated the risk and how you continue to manage it. I've been in certain supermarkets near me, and the problem I see is that the staff are not actually sticking to the requirements, and neither are the customers. So I think for all of us, you've got to realise for a while, maybe for quite a while, we have got behavioural change, and that's actually about all of us, customer, business and workers.
And certainly on the pictures of the beaches we saw yesterday on the news, it didn't seem like people were adhering to them there either. Will or Jim, anything to add to that comment?
I think it'd be good to bring Airbnb into the fold. Whether we'll ever get compulsory registration, I don't know. It's been a live discussion for a number of years. It would certainly solve the problem, but whether the government's got the appetite for it, I really don't know. But the kite mark is a good start, but I don't think the kite mark alone is not enough. We need to reassure, really, as Malcolm said, on a range of fronts. And to do that, we need to do things pretty comprehensively, really. So the challenge is that, you know, the time's ticking by. We need to move on this. We're heading to the 4th of July. Where's the kite mark? Where's the detail? Where's the government guidance? It's easy to criticise, but if we're going to get the benefit from this season's trade, we need to be on this now. And it's fine for us as DMOs to start to pull things together, but will it fit in with the guidance? Will it be appropriate? I don't know.
Just picking up on that one, I would echo what Malcolm and Jim have said. You know, we need Airbnb in there. You know, I have a lot of hoteliers who don't think it's fair that they don't fit in with the various registration elements. You know, they don't have to go in with the different insurances and fire protection and all these different things that they have to. So they also feel in the back foot about that at certain parts. However, going on to the kite mark, or as we're branded, or we will hopefully brand it on the Isle of Wight as the good to go mark. You know, it is about giving that. It's almost, you know, it's giving that confidence, but it's almost adding to your marketing about what people are doing. So people are staying in their homes. People are scared. People don't want to come out. People want to, but they still want to come on a holiday at some stage. And it's about giving them that confidence to actually, you know, bring them to the Isle of Wight and come here for your holiday. It's an amazing place, you know. But it's got to have that confidence. But equally, you've got to give your local people that confidence that these things are being adhered to. And also the staff who work in the hotels and the attractions in the various different locations. It's about giving them the confidence to go back to work as well, because currently the vast majority of them are not.
And it's about that point about bringing the local people with you on this journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. Bring them with us, because they have to understand the economic impact. And I mentioned it earlier, tourism is huge. and this pandemic is a health issue. It will turn very rapidly into an economic issue unless we actually bring back that tourism element.
We've got a question from Sonia Cooper, just asking really about this 4th of July date, that many of our accommodations are expected to open again then. Is this date actually realistic? She says, I'm thinking particularly about B&Bs and guest houses. I mean, presume that's the date that everyone's working to in your regions.
I certainly think it's realistic. You know, I've had 3 emails this morning from self-catering establishments saying, we're ready to go now. Yeah, because we're self-contained, we're we're easy to go, and smaller and more boutique and guest houses, B&Bs, and even the bigger hotels, they will be ready, and they're getting all their plans in place now. So I think the 4th of July is pretty realistic, but as the PM says, we will be led by the science, as the government will be led by the science, and that may move that back or whatever.
Yeah, sure. Jim?
I think it's from Cornwall's the same. We've got to get everybody ready for the 4th of July, because the worst thing would be not being ready and then being allowed to operate. So we travel for the 4th of July knowing that the virus might delay that, but it would be a sin not to be ready for the 4th of July.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. There's a really strong argument, I think, for self-catering. Obviously, second homes will fit into that sort of release bracket, presumably, but also owned holiday homes on holiday parks can fit into that where it's self-contained. And you could argue there's even on holiday parks and caravan parks with self-contained motorhomes, that could be an opportunity too. So I think most of the industry, I think we must be clear, our industries are very high on initiative and high on creativity. A lot of these operators are working on this now, ready to go virtually. So the 4th of July is entirely doable among quite a few sectors. However, there will need to be a phased approach, won't they? And that some sectors may come later than others, and we need to acknowledge that.
I mean, that leads on to this next point. Emma Forrester is just asking about your view on the opportunity to open up campsites over the summer period, a key income source in all 3 locations, I would imagine. And I know that people are saying that perhaps campsites work quite well because you can automatically social distance in terms of putting up your tent and things. Presumably all of those are raring to go as well and are eager to be open.
Yes, and many operators tell us that campsite facilities are the key issue there. So with shared facilities, it will need careful management, and that may mean a reduction in capacity, but definitely in terms of social distancing, the actual camping experience is quite easy, isn't it? So yeah, there's opportunities there too.
And we have got some businesses that have looked at the toilet and shower facility and are actually hiring in the units that would normally be at the festivals. So to increase the capacity so that the cleaning and the distancing can actually be solved, because obviously without Glastonbury, there's an awful lot of posh loos and posh showers that are available. So I think this is where the industry, I think we all know industry can be incredibly reactive and innovative. But that's the sort of, I think, is a really good way around getting around the problem and also increasing it. And we're also working with public health down here about guidelines for toilets, because toilets will be open everywhere. So campsites can match and beat the standards that will be required elsewhere, which comes back to the reassurance point for the public.
Brilliant, yeah. I like that idea of using the Glastonbury toilets. And I guess as well that campsites, might be able to forge new relationships with travel agents, which brings us full circle through each of the 3 of you. You know, if you're keen to kind of develop these new partnerships, then perhaps that's the way to go as well.
Yes, definitely.
And I think some of the things is maybe coming back to that wonderful thing about let's look at the winter differently. If there's a market that likes is more comfortable with very few people around them, and I think all of our destinations, nicest possible way, have those opportunities. And there's tapping into the spring watch and the winter watch and the wildlife. I think there's a lot more things we can do that sort of creates the out of season product to be different and attractive to a new market who actually quite likes the idea of not many other people around.
And this October bank holiday idea, presumably all 3 of you are in favour of that and supportive of that idea?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, it's well worth considering.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there. It's offering that additional weekend break that people can have around that bank holiday period. So yeah, all for it. You know, at the moment, I think I said in the seminar, it should be the Isle of Wight Walking Festival at the moment, but we're looking to move that, or it's suspended at the moment, clearly. We're looking to move that into October time, link it in around Halloween so that things can be different for people to actually go nighttime walks, dark skies, look out for the white-tailed seagulls that have been released on the island, all these different things. It's about looking at things differently in the season, which would normally be out of season, but it's about looking at things differently, and that's what we're doing.
Thinking innovatively as well. Brilliant. Thank you so much to all three of you. I really appreciate your time, and best of luck for the rest of the season and for the year ahead as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.